I'm currently dangling halfway off the aircraft carrier, my hands gripping a broken steel bar for dear life, with the pitch-black sea churning below. My comrade is lying beside me, his leg crushed and moaning in agony. Right before our eyes, the massive titanium elevator, the one used to transport fighter jets, weighing tens of tons, has snapped in two and is plummeting into the ocean. My ears are filled with the piercing shriek of metal being violently twisted and torn apart, a sound so jarring it feels like my skull is rattling. Just moments ago, that multi-layered titanium steel plate, thicker than my thigh, was pierced clean through by a colossal black claw that emerged from the water. The sight was terrifying. The thick, bulletproof deck might as well have been a flimsy sheet of plastic under its force, effortlessly punctured. The claw is immense, several times thicker than century-old trees we've seen on land. It's covered in dark, rigid scales that absorb all light, dull and lifeless like the eyes of a dead fish. Now, the claw is frantically scraping up and down along the edge of the deck. With every movement, large chunks of the green anti-slip coating peel off and rain down on my face, so hot I instinctively flinch. The most horrifying part is the 5 hook-like spikes at the tip of the claw, each as large as the front of a cargo truck, resembling rusty, old maritime anchors. These spikes are connected by thick cables as wide as my thumb, freshly torn from beneath the deck. The severed ends of the cables are still spewing blue sparks, crackling loudly. These 5 anchor-like spikes hover in the air, mere inches from my eyes. I can even smell the stench of rotting fish and shrimp, as if they've been baking in the sun for months, making me nauseous. Then, without any visible muscle or flesh attached, the spikes eerily rotate halfway on their own. The wind howls past my ears, and the waves below roar with a deep, ominous rumble. Searchlights sweep erratically across the scene, illuminating the massive black entity with unsettling clarity. It's lodged within the fractured deck, relentlessly clawing at the alloy beams. With each forceful pull, the entire carrier seems to shudder. I don't dare let go or even breathe too deeply, my eyes locked on the enormous black claw. Rewind half an hour. The sea was shrouded in a thick, sticky fog, a blinding white blanket. We were standing on the carrier's starboard elevator, shining powerful flashlights ahead, but the beams couldn't penetrate the mist, illuminating only a few meters ahead. At that time, the massive steel elevator, weighing tens of tons, was steadily holding 2 F-35C fighter jets that had just returned. The planes were large, their wings laden with heavy ordnance. We, the ground crew in yellow vests, were preparing to lower the elevator into the hangar below. The elevator had descended halfway when suddenly, the entire steel plate jerked violently. Then a deep, thunderous roar erupted from below, so powerful it made the soles of our feet go numb. The elevator jammed abruptly, stuck mid-descent. The hydraulic pumps, which should have been operating smoothly, began shaking uncontrollably. The machinery emitted a sharp, grinding screech, as if something hard was lodged in the gears, threatening to tear the system apart. Standing on the cold steel, I sensed something was wrong. Normally, a mechanical failure would just cause a halt. But now, I could feel a tremendous force beneath us, pounding rhythmically against the elevator's base from the direction of the sea. The squad leader shouted orders, telling us to grab our flashlights and follow him down the maintenance ladder welded to the hull. He suspected that drifting fishing nets or a lost shipping container might have gotten tangled in the hydraulic tracks. We formed a line, gripping the iron ladder tightly as we descended step by step. Our flashlight beams cut through the fog, illuminating the sea below. The water looked bizarre. Usually, waves hit the hull with a rhythmic splash. But now, the sea around the 4 titanium hydraulic pillars, each as thick as a barrel, was foaming and swirling violently, like boiling water in a pot. Suddenly, a sharp scraping sound erupted from the left hydraulic pillar. We all directed our flashlights toward it. On the gleaming titanium surface, a deep gouge had appeared, 5 centimeters deep, the fresh metal gleaming starkly under the light. The most bizarre thing was that the claw mark didn't stop. We watched helplessly as the deep gash desperately crawled upward along the hydraulic rod. It was as if an invisible, immensely powerful iron nail was firmly gripping the metal pillar, relentlessly scraping its way toward our feet. The deep metallic gash continued its frantic ascent up the hydraulic rod, the screeching sound piercing our eardrums painfully. My palms were drenched in cold sweat, my hands clenched tightly onto the iron ladder, not daring to blink. Suddenly, the churning, foam-covered seawater below parted with a loud splash. A massive black claw burst through the surface. It emerged so swiftly that the water it displaced crashed down on us, soaking our clothes completely. The moment it surfaced, without any hesitation, 5 enormous anchor-like hooks, each the size of a truck cab, thrust forward and clamped firmly onto the outermost steel guardrail of the elevator. Those railings were welded from high-strength steel bars as thick as a thumb, incredibly sturdy. But the instant they met the black claw, the steel bars twisted like overcooked noodles, snapping with sharp cracks and scattering broken metal fragments in all directions. The squad leader was closest to the claw, drenched by the wave. He staggered, but reacted quickly, drawing the pistol from his hip. Gripping it with both hands, he fired 6 consecutive shots at the climbing black claw. Muzzle flashes erupted in red sparks. The bullets struck the black scales, which resembled dead fish eyes, sending blinding sparks flying. But the bullets couldn't penetrate. They flattened into deformed lead slugs upon impact, ricocheting off with a series of clinks. One fragment grazed the cheek of a young man behind him, instantly slicing open a deep gash that bled profusely. The injured young man cried out in pain, his foot slipping, nearly sending him tumbling off the iron ladder. Before I could reach out to steady him, the claw swept sideways through the air with an eerie motion. It moved like a black lightning bolt, carrying the foul stench of dead fish, and slammed into one of the 2 parked F-35 Seafighter jets. The aircraft, immensely heavy and usually rock-steady on the deck, crumpled where the claw struck. The silver-gray fuselage instantly dented, followed by a grating sound of shattering metal. The plane's frame warped under the force, its thick metal beams snapping into segments. The wings, made of advanced carbon fiber panels, shattered into countless sharp fragments. These pieces rained down on our helmets and shoulders like hail, tearing gashes in our clothing. The claw continued to exert force. Its black scales began vibrating violently, like pistons in a car engine, producing a strange, resonant hum that made my chest tighten and my tongue go numb. As the vibrations intensified, the titanium alloy deck beneath the fighter jet fractured extensively, with anti-slip coating and steel shards scattering everywhere. The multi-ton fighter jet, pushed by this immense force, tilted toward us. The firmly anchored landing gear beneath the plane snapped sideways with a sharp crack as the alloy plating shattered. The squad leader, standing right there, had just finished reloading and had no time to retreat. The mangled, spike-covered landing gear crashed down, pinning his legs beneath it. I heard the distinct, crisp sound of breaking bone, like someone stepping on a dry twig. The squad leader didn't even have time to cry out. His eyes bulged forward, and he was instantly crushed under the heavy wreckage. His yellow vest was immediately stained red by hydraulic fluid leaking from the machinery, looking like spilled paint. The remaining young man was so terrified he dropped his flashlight. The high-powered beam landed on the twisted steel, its light flickering erratically in the thick fog, illuminating the flying debris and the claw's dark scales in alternating flashes. 2 joints on the claw bent in opposite directions with immense strain, and grayish-white mucus oozed from between the scales, dripping onto the scorching wreckage and sizzling with acrid white smoke. I desperately stretched out my arms, gripping a broken iron bar beside me with both hands, shouting for help toward the hangar above while scrambling toward the squad leader. My boots crunched over sharp aircraft debris, slipping constantly on the sticky aviation fuel leaking from the plane's ruptured tank. All around us, The blaring alarms of malfunctioning machinery wailed incessantly. The enormous black claw, after smashing a fighter jet to pieces, didn't retract immediately. Instead, its 5 massive hooks began rotating independently in midair, emitting a spine-chilling, rusted metal screech. One of the hooks even grazed the aircraft tire, pinning the squad leader, slicing a half-meter gash into the thick rubber. The high-pressure gas inside exploded with a deafening boom, sending debris flying in all directions. The shock wave slammed me against the metal ladder behind me, my back throbbing with pain. Looking up, I saw another fighter jet teetering dangerously as the elevator tilted further, its wheels grinding black marks into the alloy deck. It was about to plummet any second. Suddenly, the black claw loosened its grip, its 5 anchor-like hooks pulling free from the mangled wreckage. It slid down the scarred hull of the ship with a sickening scrape before vanishing beneath the water. The deafening metallic shrieks ceased abruptly. The fog remained thick as flour, drifting slowly in the searchlight beams. Waves lapped rhythmically against the carrier's hull, the eerie quiet now more unsettling than the earlier chaos. Only a few eerie green flames still flickered from the ruptured fuel lines of the destroyed fighter. The injured young man and I scrambled frantically toward the squad leader. His legs were still trapped under the heavy landing gear, his face as pale as paper, lips bloodless, only weak groans escaping his throat. Slipping in the slick fuel, we braced our shoulders against the warped metal beam, gritting our teeth as we mustered every ounce of strength to lift it. The beam shifted slightly. I grabbed the squad leader's yellow vest and yanked hard, finally dragging him free from the wreckage. His pant legs were soaked, the bones beneath grotesquely deformed, bent at an unnatural angle. But at least he was still breathing heavily. I snatched the radio hanging from my shoulder. Its casing had been cracked by shrapnel, and when I turned it on, an ear-splitting static screeched through, like countless nails scraping a chalkboard. I screamed into it. "This is Elevator 2. We've been attacked. The jet's destroyed. The squad leader's critically injured. Send medics now. Get the Marines down here." The radio was drowned in static, making the command center's response unintelligible. But beneath the noise, I could faintly hear the bridge's emergency red alert blaring, meaning chaos had erupted up there too. At that moment, I thought the terrifying claw had retreated. Maybe it was some colossal, rare sea creature, scared off by the explosions and flames from the fighter jet. I wiped cold sweat from my face, only to find my palm coated in a thick glue-like grayish-white slime. It was dripping down my wrist, left behind by the claw. I glanced at the titanium alloy deck beneath me. The same slime, oozing from between the claw's scales, now covered the steel plating, and it was moving like living worms. The slime pooled in patches, creeping along the deep grooves gouged into the deck, dripping toward the center of the elevator. Worse, the air had turned unnaturally cold. It was summer, yet my breath fogged visibly in front of me. The massive steel plate, suspended motionless in midair, suddenly emitted a faint, ominous creak, like what about to snap. The sound was almost imperceptible, masked by the waves. I looked down. Where the slime had spread, the bulletproof titanium alloy plating was turning a sickly gray. The once gleaming metal edges were visibly softening, crumbling like rotten tofu. The radio in my hand was still crackling with static. Suddenly, the sound cut out, replaced by an ear-piercing metallic screech, like 2 massive iron blocks grinding against each other at full speed inside a machine. The noise was so loud it made my ears ring, and my hand jerked involuntarily, nearly sending the radio flying into the sea. At that exact moment, the center of the massive titanium alloy deck beneath our feet, where the grayish-white slime had just pooled, abruptly bulged upward without warning. The bulge grew rapidly, straining the thick bulletproof steel plating with a sickening creak. Then, with a deafening roar, the entire deck beneath us exploded. The reinforced elevator platform, capable of supporting fighter jets and weighing tens of thousands of pounds, was shattered clean through the middle. The enormous black claw, this time, had thrust straight up from the depths below, piercing the entire titanium alloy deck in one brutal motion. Countless shards of shattered alloy flew outward like buckshot, ricocheting wildly in all directions. A palm-sized fragment grazed my helmet, shearing off half the plastic shell before embedding itself deep into the steel bulkhead behind me, leaving a dark, gaping hole. The claw was even larger than before, its surface densely covered in hard scales. Now its two grotesquely inverted joints twitched violently in midair, flinging globs of slime everywhere. Where the slime landed on nearby flames, thick black smoke reeking of rotting fish billowed into the air. This time, the creature's movements were entirely different. It ignored the mangled fighter jet nearby. Instead, its 5 massive anchor-like hooks, each the size of a truck's front end, splayed open in midair before snapping shut with a sickening crunch, embedding themselves deep into the elevator's primary support beams below. Those beams, forged from multiple layers of specialized steel, were the sturdiest part of the entire structure. Yet the 5 hooks sank into them as effortlessly as hot knives through butter, leaving behind 5 gaping black holes. Once anchored, the claw began pulling downward with terrifying force. The entire elevator platform, weighing dozens of tons, lurched violently toward the sea. I had been crouching on the deck, but now my body slid uncontrollably 3 or 4 meters down. My stomach and thighs slammed into a jagged piece of protruding metal, the pain so intense it brought tears to my eyes. Above us, the thumb-thick steel support cables, unable to withstand the monstrous force, began snapping one after another. Each break sounded like a high-caliber cannon firing point-blank, the severed cables whipping through the air like frenzied serpents, reducing nearby railings to twisted wreckage. One snapped cable lashed across the tail of an intact fighter jet, shattering the sturdy wing into countless fragments that scattered into the thick fog. The massive steel deck tilted further, now at a terrifying 30-degree angle. The aviation fuel pooling on the surface cascaded like a flash flood toward the gaping hole at the center, where the claw had torn through. The black fuel poured into the abyss, igniting upon contact with sparking cables below. Instantly, flames roared 2 meters high, casting an eerie, blood-red glow through the mist. Our squad leader, already injured and immobilized, began tumbling down the slope. I kicked desperately against the warped alloy, finally finding a foothold in a dented groove. Lunging forward, I grabbed the straps on the back of his uniform just as his momentum threatened to wrench my arms from their sockets. Through it all, the black claw continued its relentless descent. With every centimeter it retracted, the entire platform sank further. Nearby, the undamaged fighter jet's tires screeched against the tilting deck as the massive aircraft began sliding inexorably toward us. The elevator deck's tilt grew steeper, the angle now horrifyingly acute. Behind us, the fully intact F-35 CS tires shrieked against the alloy surface before the jet's colossal weight overcame friction. Slowly, then with gathering speed, the aircraft slid sideways, directly toward our position. The young man who had just suffered a deep gash on his face was now completely broken. Clambering upward in a frantic scramble, he let out a high-pitched, tearful scream. He hurled everything he could from his hands, gripping the deformed iron maintenance ladder welded to the carrier's outer wall with all his might. His feet slipped on the slick metal surface, his right foot repeatedly losing traction before he finally managed to plant both feet on the ladder's rungs. He began climbing the iron ladder desperately, trying to reach the hangar deck above. Moving swiftly, using both hands and feet, he babbled incoherently, screaming his mother's name. But just as his hand grasped the 5th rung, the enormous black claw suddenly reappeared from the gaping hole in the deck below. The claw scraped violently upward along the carrier's steel hull, its 5 anchor-like hooks sending a shower of sparks over 2 meters high against the hard ship's side, sounding like dozens of power saws cutting through sheet metal. The claw struck the very ladder the young man was climbing. With a series of sickening cracks and clangs, the emergency maintenance ladder, made of steel pipes as thick as a forearm, was torn into several pieces under the force of the claw. Large sections of iron bars and screws rained down from the ship's side like a storm. The young man's hands suddenly grasped at empty air. Waving his arms wildly in midair, his screams stretched into a long, piercing wail. Then, he plummeted straight down from over 10 meters high. Below was the churning, pitch-black sea. As he fell, not even a significant splash was made. His entire body was swallowed by the water in an instant, leaving no trace behind. My fingers dug into the deck's mooring cleats, nails peeling back and oozing sticky blood. But I felt no pain. One of my feet was hooked tightly into the squad leader's yellow vest strap. He had passed out from the pain, his body limp and sagging, held only by my foot and one hand gripping him fiercely. Then, 2 more deafening explosions rang out overhead. The last 2 main steel cables of the elevator had snapped. As they broke, the cables whipped through the air in dark arcs, shattering the intact guardrails on either side into dust. Now, the entire elevator platform hung by only 2 thin steel cables on the right side. The massive steel plate tilted almost vertically, the sliding fighter jet's wing slamming into the edge of a nearby hatch, sending a spray of sparks. The heavy tail of the plane swung within a meter of my head, its enormous black shadow blotting out the searchlights above. If we waited any longer, once those last 2 cables snapped, the tens of thousands of pounds of steel, along with the fighter jet, would drag the squad leader and me down like an anchor into the abyss below. No one could save us then. I turned my head, sweeping the flashlight's dim beam through the fog. About 3 meters away, the carrier's outer wall had an emergency firefighting pipe, a thick, heavy cast iron tube bolted securely to the ship's alloy hull in sections with massive screws. The pipe was still intact, untouched by the monster's claw. Looking at the squad leader, now completely immobile beside me, my teeth ground together audibly. Freeing one hand, I yanked off the wide, rigid black strap from his bulletproof vest. I wrapped it twice around his waist, then tied the other in tightly around my own right wrist, looping it over and over until my skin turned blue and purple from the pressure. I clutched the squad leader tightly against me, my left hand gripping his shoulder, my right foot braced against the edge of the nearly vertical deck. Just then, the black claw flexed below. With a cannon-like crack, the last 2 steel cables snapped. The enormous elevator platform, now completely unsupported, began its free fall, crashing thunderously toward the dark sea. In the split second before the platform dropped, I pushed off with the last bit of leverage from the steel beneath my feet. Holding the squad leader, I leaped outward with all my strength, throwing us both into the howling wind toward that black cast iron firefighting pipe. We were plummeting straight down through the air, the howling wind roaring in our ears. My eyes were locked onto the cast iron damage control pipe that was rapidly approaching. Just as our bodies were about to brush past it, my hands shot forward with all my strength, my fingers desperately clawing at the cold, rough surface of the pipe. The sheer momentum of our fall was immense. My arms were instantly yanked taut, and a dull crack echoed from my shoulder joints, sending a wave of pain so intense that tears streamed down my face. My right wrist was still tightly wrapped in the squad leader's belt, his full weight, easily over 100 pounds, hanging from my right arm. The belt dug mercilessly into my flesh, splitting the skin on my wrist, and bright red blood trickled down the pipe. My feet scrambled frantically against the alloy plating of the carrier's outer wall, the soles of my shoes leaving black rubber streaks on the rough metal surface. Finally, my left foot found purchase on a large iron base securing the pipe, and at last, our bodies stabilized mid-air. Just as we dangled against the carrier's outer hull, hell itself erupted beneath us. The fallen elevator, weighing dozens of tons, along with the intact and the already wrecked fighter jets atop it, plummeted toward the ocean below. When they were just 4 or 5 meters from the water, the enormous black claw lurking beneath the surface unleashed an unimaginable force. The 5 massive anchor-like hooks, each the size of a truck cab, snapped shut in midair. They clamped onto the main fuselage beams of both fighter jets and the thick titanium alloy elevator deck. Then the claw twisted inward with crushing force, like wringing out a wet towel. The specialized aircraft-grade steel, normally impervious to missile strikes, and the high-strength titanium alloy plates let out a series of sickening metallic cracks under the claw's grip. The entire F-35CS wings were instantly snapped into 4 or 5 pieces, its thick metal exhaust nozzle flattened like a crushed can. The 2 jets and the massive steel plate were forcibly compressed into a grotesque, misshapen metal ball over 10 meters in diameter. Inside the ball, residual jet fuel ignited under the extreme pressure, triggering a chain reaction of explosions. Orange fireballs erupted from the gaps, sending shrapnel, shredded wiring, and red-hot metal nails raining against the carrier's hull in a relentless patter. The intense flames illuminated the ocean below as bright as day. The creature's claw retracted, dragging the mangled metal wreckage deep underwater. As it moved, an enormous black shadow, wider than the entire carrier, emerged from the depths. With a single motion, the water surface revealed an even thicker, longer segment of the monstrous arm behind the claw. The arm was over 10 meters wide, devoid of hair or normal skin. Beneath the black, fisheye-like scales were rows of pulsating, deep red flesh resembling gills. Each gill was over 2 meters long, spewing thick, milky fluid that turned the surrounding seawater a murky gray. At that moment, the Marines from the upper deck finally arrived. They leaned over the high railings above, firing their rifles down at the massive black arm in a frenzy. Shdown hot tot 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 tot. Asterisk bullets rained like a storm onto the red gill tissue. Some ricocheted off the scales in showers of sparks, while others tore into the fleshy gills with wet thuds. The creature roared in pain, its colossal arm thrashing violently across the water surface. In its frenzy, the claw's tip struck a massive emergency damage control box mounted above us. The box, welded to the hull with thick steel plates and filled with fire axes and heavy tools, was obliterated on impact. Shards of metal and axes rained down, clanging against the cast iron pipes beside us. Then, the Marines above hurled several round defensive explosive charges. The explosive charges fell into the seawater around the massive claw. Boom, boom. Several muffled, thunderous explosions sent towering waves dozens of meters high into the air. A vast expanse of white, lifeless smoke billowed across the water surface. The tremendous shock waves surged upward, tossing the squad leader and me, still clinging to the pipe like kites swaying wildly in midair. My back slammed violently against the alloy outer wall of the aircraft carrier, the impact forcing a mouthful of salty blood from my lips. When the smoke finally cleared, I looked down and saw that several large scales on the enormous black arm had been blasted off by the explosives. Beneath them lay a patch of deathly gray, rock-hard flesh, not a drop of red blood in sight. Only a gushing torrent of pale, viscous fluid pouring out like water from an open tap. The creature seemed enraged by the explosives. Its 5 anchor-like hooks spun wildly in the air before the entire arm suddenly jerked upward, slamming directly onto the edge of the massive hatch where elevator number 2 had once been connected. That section was part of the carrier's main armor belt, thick enough to withstand torpedoes. Yet under the force of the colossal claw's strike, the entire reinforced alloy hatch crumpled inward. The surrounding steel framework burst apart one beam after another, the sound like a string of firecrackers exploding right in front of our ears. Huge sheets of metal collapsed into the carrier's interior, severing wires and pipelines, while bursts of blue high-voltage electricity crackled chaotically in the now pitch-black hatchway. The claw dug into the mangled edge of the hatch and yanked downward with another surge of force. Tons of armored plating tore away like scraps of paper, crashing into the dark waters below with a resounding splash. Then, the red, gill-like tissues along the creature's arm gaped wide, releasing a deep, resonant hum, like the combined bellowing of 10,000 bulls from beneath the earth. The sound traveled through the carrier's steel plates, vibrating my eardrums until warm blood trickled from my ears. My head throbbed as if 1,000 hornet nests had been dumped inside. The pain so unbearable I wanted to smash my skull against the pipe. The Marines above continued hurling explosives relentlessly, their gunfire piercing through the thick fog. The creature, seemingly frustrated by the stubborn resistance, clenched its 5 massive hooks around the twisted wreckage of planes and deck plating, then reared back. With a deafening crash, it plunged the still-sparking, exploding mass of scrap metal back into the inky depths of the sea. A towering wave, over 10 meters high, slammed against the carrier's outer wall, knocking the squad leader and me unconscious as we dangled from the pipe. The surrounding flames flickered out instantly, leaving only the wailing alarms on the deck above and the relentless rush of seawater flooding through the shattered hatch. Freezing seawater splashed onto our faces. I slowly opened my eyes. The sky was still shrouded in thick white fog. The thunderous explosions had ceased entirely. The Black Claw and the tons of mangled aircraft wreckage had sunk completely into the abyss below. Thick safety ropes with hooks descended from the deck above. Damage control crew in red vests slid down, hastily securing the squad leader and me with carabiners before hauling us up inch by inch. My back and but scraped against the steel plating, the pain making me gasp sharply. Once we were dragged into the hangar deck, heavy stretchers were immediately brought over. I collapsed onto the cold, oil-stained safety plating, panting heavily. A medic beside me snipped open my pant leg with scissors. My right ankle was swollen like a watermelon, the skin completely scraped off, exposing white bone fragments jutting through raw, red flesh. The squad leader lay on another stretcher, his legs completely shattered, his pant legs soaked in a mix of sticky oil and blood. He was unconscious. With great effort, I turned my head and peered through the mangled hangar doorway. Where the solid, multi-layered armored elevator number 2 had once stood, there was now only a gaping hole over 10 meters wide, its edges lined with twisted rebar and shredded metal. Black seawater gushed through the breach, flooding the carrier's lower compartments. At the very top of the gap, embedded in the main armor plating, was a massive handprint over a meter deep. It was a gouge torn by the 5 anchor-like hooks. The titanium alloy around the edges had been reduced to powdery debris, the broken steel rods within still sizzling with black smoke, emitting a pungent stench of burnt fish and metal.